Okay, so thank you very much. As you may know, we're just a few hours before the holiday of Shavuot. This
Mm-hmm.
is after we've counted 7 times 7 weeks. There is a commandment in the Torah, a mitzvah, that right after the first day of Pesach, we begin to count what's called Sfirat HaOmer, and we
Mm-hmm.
count 49 days. Today is the 49th day. We're finishing the process that began on Pesach, Passover. And tonight, actually in Israel, in another 3 hours, we begin the holiday of Shavuot. Shavuot has two meanings to it. It's the day that we celebrate the receiving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And it's also the harvest festival, the grain harvest festival. So it has actually two meanings, but in both cases, it's the culmination of a whole process that began at Pesach time 7 weeks ago. Today, we finished the 7 weeks of preparation, and tonight is the holiday of Shavuot. So the subject that we picked for today is Secrets of the Hebrew Letters. Because if we talk about the Torah, well, what is the Torah? The Torah is letters that make up words. In other words, the basis of the Torah are the letters. So we're going to learn, we'll call it an introduction to the secrets of the Hebrew letters. So every morning in our prayers, we say the following. In Hebrew, the words are Baruch she'amar v'haya olam. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into being. So the question is this a poetic statement? Is this a kind of like a parable or an allegory? What does it mean that God spoke and the world came into being? So if we look at the beginning of the Torah, the account of creation, we'll see that 10 times, it's actually 9 times, we have the formula, and God said something, and there was something. In other words, through God's speech, reality was created. What's the first one? Probably the most known one. Vayomer Elokim yehi or, vayehi or. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. So how did light come into being? Through the letters that God spoke it into being. So in other words, if you look at the word for light, which is or, if you understood the 3 letters of the word or, you would understand what light is. In other words, the Hebrew letters are not just symbols of sounds that we make in order to form words. And then a society attaches certain meaning to certain words. Hebrew is not like this. The essence of what something is made up of the letters that form it. So, for example, I wrote a book about light. It's called The Mystical Nature of Light. And one of the chapters is, let's take the 3 letters of the word light and I explain what light is, not just spiritually, but physically, according to physics, by understanding what the three letters of light are. And this is true for the entire Torah. The whole Hebrew language is like this, that the Hebrew letters are considered the building blocks of creation. Similar to if you would ask a scientist, what is the world made of? What are the building blocks of the world? So a scientist would answer atoms, molecules, particles. This is what the world is made up of. It doesn't matter if it's mineral, plant, animal, or human. Everything is made up of atoms and particles, elements. So similarly, that's how we look at the Hebrew letters, that the Hebrew letters are life force. It is the building blocks of creation. And that's why we have a saying in our mystical tradition that God looked into the Torah and he created the world. In other words, the Torah is what we'll call the blueprint. So let's say someone wants to build a house. So let's say they have a picture in their mind, a vision of what their dream house would like to be. Now the question is, how do you get that from a thought into an actual house that you could live in? So what is the first thing that a person would do? He would go to an architect and he'd explain, this is how I see my house. And the architect would make a blueprint. And then the builders would look at the blueprint and they would know how to build the house. So that's how we look at the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint of creation. And as we began, what is the Torah made of? Hebrew letters. That is what the Torah is made of. So I'm going to read a letter. Does everyone know who the Baal Shem Tov is?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, Hasidic master.
Yes, the Baal Shem Tov is the initiator of the Hasidic movement, and he didn't write anything. In other words, all of his teachings came through his students. His students wrote down his teachings. But there's one letter that the Baal Shem, that we have from the Baal Shem Tov that he wrote to his brother-in-law. And in this letter, he explains in Hebrew, it's called an aliyat neshama. He had a elevation of soul, and he went to the higher worlds, and he was able to have a conversation with the soul of the Messiah. And he asked him, when are you coming? And the Messiah, the Mashiach, answered, the soul of the Mashiach answered, when the well springs of your Torah spread to the whole world. So I could say I'm actually quite excited to be able to be teaching you today, because that is the mission that the Baal Shem Tov was given, to spread these teachings to their farthest reaches. Now he explains this in the letter, and then he says the following. The Mashiach taught him all kinds of secrets. And the Baal Shem Tov says to his brother-in-law, these things I cannot reveal to you. But then he says like this, but this I may inform you, and may God help you. Your way shall ever be in the presence of God and never leave your consciousness in the time of
Excuse
your
me.
prayer and study. In other words, he's about to reveal a secret to him that he's telling him that you should keep in your consciousness at all times. But what is this secret that he's about to share?
Excuse me.
says-
We have a friend. Maybe we have to mute him or her.
Yes,
华为 P30可以把声音 mute 掉吗？静音，要不然我们这边已经很多杂音了哈。OK， 谢谢。OK， Thank you.
Okay, now everyone listen to this. Every word of your lips intend to unite, for in every letter there are worlds, souls, and divinity. Divinity means godliness. And they ascend and connect and unify with each other. And afterwards, the letters connect and unify to become a word. And then unify in true unification with the divine. So what is he saying here? He's saying every letter in the Torah has 3 different dimensions that are called worlds, souls, and divinity. So I'm going to explain that now. In other words, each letter has a manifestation in the physical world, in the worlds. And if we had a lot of time, I could explain a lot more about this. But meaning that every letter in the Torah, this is what creates the physical world. The physical world is, like we said before, just like what is water? H2O. It is a combination of hydrogen and oxygen. That is what water is. When we look at the world, we see it's a combination of letters. And so the whole physical world is built from letters. Now, is science and Torah talking about different things? No, they're talking about exactly the same thing. It's just a different way of saying it. In other words, we're not saying that science is wrong. Of course, the world is made up of atoms and elements and particles, but we call them letters. So that's on the level of worlds. The physical world, every letter has a manifestation in the physical world. What we're going to do after I say this, I'm going to go through an example of one of the letters to make it more concrete. Now, on the level of souls, what it's saying is soul means consciousness. Our consciousness is made and maintained by the Hebrew letters. So in other words, each of the letters has a meaning as it affects my soul, my emotions, my intellect, my consciousness, my world view. And then on the level of divinity, which means godliness, each of these letters is an instrument that raises us up beyond soul to a more divine level. Okay, I hope everyone understood that, but I'm going to give you more concrete examples of this. But now, each letter also has 3 other important dimensions. Each letter, and this is something I assume that you can understand from Chinese, because Chinese is what we call a pictogrammic language.
Yes.
If I understand correctly, the figures in the Chinese, I'll call it the alphabet, are like pictures. They represent something. So we're going to just start with this is the first letter of the Hebrew letters. It's an Aleph. So in let's say English, if you would draw an A and you would ask, what does that A mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's just a symbol of a sound. But the Aleph, this is a picture. And I'm going to explain it in a minute. This is a picture. The next letter is a bet. Again, this tells a story. It's not just a symbol of a sound. It tells a story. So every Hebrew letter is a symbolic of an energy, of a force. So that's one level. On the next level, each letter in Hebrew has a name. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled. Each one of these means something. It's not like A, B, C, D. You'll ask, what does C mean? Doesn't mean anything. It's just the name of the letter that looks like this. It has no intrinsic meaning, but each of the Hebrew letters means something. It's either a verb or a noun that has a meaning in the world. And then each letter has a number. Aleph, the first letter is 1. The second letter is 2. And it goes all the way up to 400. Now, this is very, very important because there is a whole dimension of the Torah that is a mathematical code. A word is made up of letters. So each word has a numerical value. Now, what happens if you have 2 words that have the same value? So we're told, there must be a connection. There must be a connection between this word, concept, idea, and this word and concept and idea. And from that, many, many secrets of the Torah are revealed. So maybe you've heard of what's called the Bible codes. The Bible codes is an attempt to run the Torah through the computer in order to find patterns, to find hidden codes that are happening. Well, this is a secret that we've known for thousands of years. It just happens that the computer is a big help in revealing all kinds of new dimensions that are not apparent at first. So let's review now. Each letter has a meaning in the physical world, has a meaning for the soul, and has a meaning for the way God, in a sense, views the letter. That's one set of 3. And the other set of 3 is each letter has a form, meaning a picture, a name, and a number. Okay, so now what we're going to do, because this might be a bit not completely clear. So I am going to take this one letter and I'm going to try to explain it according to the these different levels. Okay? That's what we're going to do now. So we're going to start by, again, we're going to start with the Aleph. This is what an Aleph looks when it's written in the Torah. And it's, as we're going to see, it's actually a very paradoxical letter, because you have one energy going up, you have one energy coming down. Now, if you only had this and this, perhaps we would call this like the yin-yang. You'd have like this duality. You'd have the duality. Yes. But the key here is we have something that's connecting and separating at the same time, which is opposites. It's a bit paradoxical. Is it connecting it or is it separating it? The answer is both. The answer is both. So now, hopefully you have that picture in your mind. What we're going to do is we're going to try to explain this form according to the worlds, the soul, and divinity. So we're going to start. We're going to, I can hold this up. I think it will be helpful. So on the second day of creation, it says that God created the firmament and he separated between the upper waters and the lower waters. So this letter represents that. These are the upper waters. These are the lower waters. And this is the firmament that separates. So the lower waters, this is what we would call the how rain is produced, where you have lakes and seas and rivers and streams, and there's evaporation, and the water rises up, and then it comes back down as it forms clouds and rain. Okay, and this is the firmament. We'll call it the stratosphere. But then there are the upper waters. And we know that many of the planets and stars are basically ice. They are, it's so cold that it's actually can form ice. This is also in the world, in the body. So we have the respiratory system here. In the lungs, there's a lot of moisture in the lungs. And at the stomach, there's a lot of moisture in the stomach. And the diaphragm is separating. So that is this picture. This is the respiratory. This is the digestive. And this is the diaphragm that separates and connects at the same time. Okay? So what we're trying to show is that this picture or this form has a manifestation in the physical world. Now, what about in the soul? What does this represent? This idea that there is an upper line and a lower line and a line in between. So this is in our emotions, in our consciousness. Sometimes we feel very close to God. Sometimes we feel very distant from God. In other words, this is how this letter manifests in the soul. And I think everyone can understand this. Sometimes we feel good about life. We feel connected to God. We feel connected to our own soul. And other times we feel so cut off, so alone. So this is how the Aleph is represented in the soul. Now there's a statement in the Zohar that says, one side of my heart is laughing and one side of my heart is crying. So how do we understand this? I'm sure everyone can understand this. There are times that we are happy, and there are times that we are sad, we're crying. Now that sounds like, oh, that's easy, but it's not so easy. How many times have we gone, let's say, to an event where everyone is happy, but I'm feeling sad? Or we go to, let's say, a funeral where we're supposed to feel somewhat of empathy for the people. And maybe inside we're feeling very happy. So in other words, to know when to be happy and when to be sad is not so simple. It's not so simple. But there's a deeper understanding, and that's where this line comes in. That we're told on one level, there's a time to be happy, there's a time to be laughing, and there's a time to be crying. But the deeper understanding is that I should be laughing and crying simultaneously all the time. What does that mean? When I look at the world and I see here in Israel, we're experiencing this right now, and I see how many wars there are, and how many hungry people there are, and how much hatred there is, and how much disagreement and lack of cooperation, how can I not be crying? But at the same time, if I look at the world and I see what a beautiful place it is, and how many good people there are, and so many things to be grateful for, how can I not be laughing? So the idea is that, like I said before, this line is sometimes separating and sometimes uniting. So here, sometimes it's only appropriate to be laughing. And sometimes it's only appropriate to be crying. But in the bigger picture, we want to be both laughing and crying all the time, because that is the state of the world. It's a broken world, and it's a wonderful world all at the same time. So that's how this letter is manifest on the level of the soul. Now, what about on the level of God? So this represents, there are two aspects of how God relates to the world and we experience God. There's a part of God that's called transcendent, meaning above the world, beyond the world, beyond time, beyond space, beyond anything that we can comprehend. That's this line. But then there's an aspect of God that's what's called immanent, that every point of space and every moment of time is infused with godly energy. So you would say, well, which one is it? Is God beyond the world, or is God in the world? So we answer, they're both true at the same time. There's an aspect of God that's beyond our comprehension, and there's an aspect of God that is everywhere we look. Everything we experience is a manifestation of godliness in the world that he created. So here we just completed, in short, trying to understand how this letter is represented in the physical world, meaning the upper worlds. We could also say this is like the spiritual worlds. This is the physical worlds. Well, are those two different things completely? Sometimes that's how we experience it. But on a deeper level, they are connected. Spiritual and physical are always connected. And then we saw it in the soul, that there's different types of feelings that we have. Sometimes we feel close and sometimes we feel far away. And then we saw that the way that God relates to the world is sometimes God is very far above this world. And other times we experience God as being everywhere, in everything. Okay, so that is this level. Now we're going to go to the name. The name of this letter is Aleph. Now, the word Aleph in Hebrew means a number of different things. And as we're going to see, each one relates to a different level of worlds, souls, and divinity. So on the level of worlds, one of the words for an ox, the animal, an ox, is Aleph. So this means that on the physical level, this letter represents the physical world. The Aleph is the manifestation of physicality. Now, the ox in ancient times was considered the strongest of animals. We used to plow with an ox because the ox was the strongest animal. So that represents physicality. And it also represents our what's called the lower soul. We have a higher soul, so that is also very much connected. Every person has a higher soul and a lower soul that's called an animal soul. And that's the ox. That's the Aleph on the level of worlds. On the level of soul, the word Aleph means to teach. Now, if any of you have studied any Hebrew, so in Israel, when let's say a new immigrant comes to Israel and he doesn't know Hebrew, so where does he learn? It's called an ulpan. Maybe you've heard this word, an ulpan. That's the name of a school or a course that will teach Hebrew. Well, the root of the word ulpan is Aleph, because that's what Aleph means. Aleph means to teach. So there is a verse that says, Alefecha chachma. I will teach you wisdom. God is talking to human beings and saying, I will teach you wisdom. So on the level of souls, the Aleph means to teach and to learn. Now there's another meaning for Aleph, and again, all of these manifest in modern Hebrew. So in the army, a general is called an aluf, because the Aleph represents what's called the master. So in the Talmud, sometimes we refer to God as Alufo Shel Olam, the master of the world. But again, it comes from the word Aleph. So here, only because of a lack of time, we can't go into each one of these things deeper, but we saw that Aleph means ox, that's the level of worlds. Aleph means to teach, well, that's what the soul is all about, to teach and to learn. And on the level of godliness, God is the master of the world. He is the creator. He's running the ship here. So we call him like the general, Alufo Shel Olam. Okay, now we're going to go to the number. The number of Aleph is 1. So how is that manifest in the worlds, in souls, and divinity? So in the world, this is what's called the secret of cause and effect. In other words, in mathematics, in a certain level, you take the number 10. What is the number 10? 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 until you get to 10. Now this might seem, no, that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but the whole world is run by computers now. It's unbelievable to understand. Every computer, even though now they're talking about that we're getting ready for what's called quantum computers, which will bump up the whole thing completely. But right now, every computer in the world is based on what's called the binary system. The binary system is just simply 0 and 1. Every computer in the world, no matter how complicated, no matter how many actions it can do per second, it's all the operating system is a binary system, which is 0 and 1. That's all it is. And that is like cause and effect. Everything that happens is just 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. So that's how the Aleph manifests in the physical world. That's how nature works, cause and effect. 0, 1, or 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. It's all Alephs. You know, when you, have you ever looked at, well, I don't even know if you can experience this anymore. It used to be a TV set. I don't think the screens work like this. It used to be a TV set that if you would put your eyes like right up to the screen, all you would see are dots. As you move back, all the dots form pictures. Now, this is very similar to what's called Impressionist art. If you look at of the Impressionist art, from a distance, you see beautiful nature and streams and fields and trees. As you approach the picture, you start to see that each of the figures are made from just lines of color. Try it in the museum. The next time you go to a museum and you look at the Impressionist art from like the 1870s through the 1930s. So in a sense, all of reality are Alephs. If you could see the screen of reality, that's all you would see. It's just Aleph, 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 Aleph. Okay, what about the soul? So this is something that we relate to in our prayers. Every Shabbat, we say the following. We're talking to God in our prayers, and we say, you are one, and your name is one, and who is like your people, one nation in the earth. In other words, and especially because of Jewish history, so the Jewish people were spread out throughout the entire world. But we maintained that we were one people. We maintained our unity. And now that we're coming back to Israel, so the idea is that eventually every Jew will come back to Israel, and we will be one nation in the land, one nation in the earth. On a deeper soul level, we're told that every Jew is actually part of one soul. One soul. And we're just individual sparks of one soul. So that's how the number one relates to the soul. And on the level of godliness, so this is what's called the cardinal principle of faith, is called Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel, God our God is one. That's how the Aleph, the oneness, is represented on the divine level. From the time of Abraham, this has been the mission of the Jewish people, is to reveal the simple teaching that there is only one God, one creator. But what it means is not just that there's one God, but that everything is a part of that oneness. Now, like I mentioned, sometimes you look at the world and we don't see that oneness so much, but that doesn't mean it's not there. In other words, every star in every galaxy and every person and every tree and every atom and every particle is all part of God's oneness. That's what it means when we say, Hear, O Israel, God our God, God is one. It's the awareness that it is all united. Now, we see this in science, that Albert Einstein, after revealing so much, so he devoted the rest of his life to what was called the unified field theory, meaning that all of science understands right now that there are four cardinal forces in the universe. What's called the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. These are the four forces. And Albert Einstein was looking for the formula, just like he said, M equal, what am I saying? M equals, help me out here.
MC squared.
E equals MC squared. Thank you. E equals MC squared. So what did Albert Einstein reveal? An amazing thing, that matter and energy is the same thing. That all of matter is energy. My hand is energy. This book is energy. This light is energy. Everything is energy, but people didn't see it that way. But he wanted to go beyond this and to show that all of the forces of nature are unified. Now today, they call it something different. They call it the theory of everything. That's what they're looking for. Because all of science understands that all of these forces are basically all one. They're all united. And in fact, we're told that right after the Big Bang, all four forces were unified. It was only as the universe began to expand and it began to cool down that the different forces, in a sense, became separate. So this is all just to explain that from God's point of view, everything is one. And our task, our mission is to teach our consciousness to understand that and to appreciate that and to connect to that. So here we've taken the letter Aleph, and although we did it quickly, I am hoping that it will give you a sense of how each letter has a form, has a name, and has a number. And that each one of these in the form, this form manifests in the worlds, in the soul, and in godliness. And the name, the same thing, manifests in the world, in the soul, and in godliness. So when one goes through all of the letters and one begins to understand, then we can go back to the first thing we said, is that according to our tradition, we see the letters as the building blocks of creation. In other words, they manifest themselves everywhere. Everywhere is just a combination of letters. And as I said, we're not saying anything different than science is saying. But instead of calling it atoms and particles and elements, we're calling them letters. So it's really the same idea. So I'm going to end with a blessing, and then we'll take a few minutes if anyone wants to unmute. Hopefully the host will unmute people, or maybe I can, I'm not sure.
You are the host.
Okay, I am the host now. Okay. So I'll end with a blessing. I hope that this introduction to the Hebrew letters, from the aspect that we did, my feeling is many of you are familiar with the Hebrew letters, but not necessarily with the teachings that we gave over today. And I can just hope that they were inspiring and that it will whet your thirst to learn more about this. I'm sure if you just Google the mystical meaning of the letters, well, actually, I'm going to invite you, of course, if you come to my website, I have 23 videos. One is an introduction, like we just did now, but each one is like 5 to 7 minutes. And then 5 to 7 minutes on each letter. So I invite you to come to my website. It's thetrugmans.com. Very simple. TheTrugmans.com. Thetrugmans.com. Or you can just Google Trugman Aleph Bet, and you'll get 23 videos, and I'm sure you'll find them very, very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. Okay, so let's see.
大家有问题吗？
Let me see.
Rabbi,
Yes.
thank you so much for this brilliant. This is so wonderful, your lecture, your presentation. I never knew Hebrew letters has such profound connotations. I never knew that. I've been to Israel twice, following I'm a Catholic, and our church, our priest led holy pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and I love Israel. I love Jerusalem. I just love everything there. And I wanted to learn Hebrew, but I realized it's a difficult language. But after your presentation today, I know I'm going to learn it.
Good.
It's too good. I never knew this. It's connecting to the physical form, and then the soul, and then the godliness. Everything, we're all united. It's everything is one. God is beyond. It's beyond. He's beyond us, and He's with us. It's so wonderful. I must learn Hebrew. Thank you so much.
Starting
Thank
from
you
the
so much.
23 videos from Rabbi's website, maybe. That's a good idea,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay, thank you so much.
Rabbi,
Yes.
let me make sure I got your website correct.
Well, you know
It's
what? I'm going to write it in the chat. Let me do that
Yeah.
right now to make it
Oh, thank you.
clear. 1 second. Okay, let's see. Okay, do you see that?
Got it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's it. And I'm also gonna write my email. If anyone
Oh,
would
please,
like
thank
to
you.
be in touch. Okay, do you see the email?
Yes, thank you.
Rabbi@thetrugmans.com. I'd be happy
Thank
to
you very
answer any
much.
questions and to be in touch with you.
Thank you so much.
Rabbi, thank you much for this wonderful lecture. Basically, I think it's a very nice lecture, and especially for today because it's a traditional to do the overnight study in the
Right.
even of the Shavuot.
Right. Right. We have a long night in front of us.
Of course, the whole night of the study, yes, to share the new knowledge.
Yes.
And maybe you will drink a lot of coffee.
I drink green tea.
Oh, green tea. Oh.
Caffeinated green tea.
Mm. Okay.
Okay, anyone else has a question or a comment?
别人还有问题，或者是有一些什么想Shao.
Thank you, Rabbi Abraham. I have a question. While
Okay.
you were talking, this occurred to me. And when you're talking about God's creation, I was thinking, what language God used to create the world and the universe?
Hebrew. That's the whole point.
That is Hebrew. And after the creation, all people on the earth, they spoke Hebrew, right?
According to our tradition, until the Tower of Babel, that was the universal language, and then all the languages got mixed up. They got mixed up. You know, there's a book. I don't have it, but I've seen it. It's called something like 1,000 Hebrew Roots in English. And it goes to 1,000 words in English that come originally from Hebrew. So that is our tradition, that that's the whole thing. God looked into the Torah and created the world. He looked into the Hebrew letters, and like the building blocks, he created the world.
Which means we originally know Hebrew.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So God was a teacher who taught Hebrew language to the people he created, he loved.
Yeah, you could say that. Remember we learned Alufo Shel Olam, the master of the world, and Aleph means to teach, Ulpan. So like you're saying, God created the world. Actually, it says about Adam, it says that God brought all of the animals before Adam, and that which he called them, that was their name. So we're told that Adam was able to look at, and not just animals really, it was everything. He was able to look at things and understand which Hebrew letters not just represented, but was the energy, was the essence of this animal or thing. And he named it according to that. And again, that's how we look at Hebrew. It's not just letters that are symbolic of sounds, but hopefully by the way that we were learning, we saw the difference between A, B, C, D, and how the Hebrew letters work. It's a completely different thing altogether. It's not a value judgment. It's just completely different how we look at the Hebrew letters. Okay, we have time for one more question. Anyone?
还有问题吗？还有机会提一个问题。
Yo, Rabbi, I was wondering, eventually I would like to be able to read Torah in Hebrew. How long, I know it's going to take time and efforts. How long do you think it's going to take? Because I don't really know, because right now Hebrew sounds so difficult, so far away. I
wouldn't be honest if I said it would take an enormous effort. Now, the big difference is some people have a knack for languages and some people don't so much. Some people are able to pick up languages very, very quickly, and other people have a very, very hard time. So it depends.
Okay.
It depends, not just with Hebrew, it depends with other languages also. But the main thing is how much you want it. In other words, if someone wants something, then they will work for it until it happens. So I can just bless you, if this is what you want to do, that you have the strength and the determination and the discipline to do it.
Thank you. I will do it. I will read Hebrew.
Okay.
I will read Torah in Hebrew.
I do want to mention
Thank
something which is very, very important, is when people read the Bible in English, a person absolutely cannot really understand very much about the Torah, because the English that we have today is a translation from the King James version of the Bible, which is a translation from the Greek, which is a translation from the Hebrew. And the big difference is it's without the oral tradition. Without the oral tradition, we can't understand even the simple meaning of the words. So that's why you have to have both the written Torah and the oral Torah that goes with it. Now, I know a lot of people read the Bible in English, and of course you can understand something, but in so many cases, people get the wrong impression. They read it in English without any explanation that went along with it. And so therefore, sometimes you can understand, but in so many cases, the real meaning might be the exact opposite of what it appears to say.
I see.
So, yeah.
I read both Latin and English, and I notice in Latin, often they rhyme, and then in English, they don't rhyme. I learned Latin. I started learning Latin about 5 years ago, and now I can read some. So I would like to read. I would like to be able to understand the deeper meaning, the underlying, what's really behind it. That's what I would like to be
Well,
able
if you were
to
able to pick
achieve.
up Latin, you should be able to pick up Hebrew. Why not?
Wonderful.
Why not?
Thank you. Yes.
Latin is
yes.
not an English, is not an easy language. So if you could do Latin, you could do Hebrew.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Okay.
encouragement.
Okay. So
Rabbi,
I want to thank Dot for inviting
My
me.
pleasure.
And
And Hannah for organizing
and
such
Hannah,
a Zoom.
who organized it, thank you very much. And just end with a blessing that hopefully you will be inspired to delve deeper into all that we talked about.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Okay.
Yes.
Take care, everyone. Take care.
Shalom.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Shalom.
Keep
Thank
well.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.